Wilson here again, and then in this video I'm going to be teaching you guys about Unit 13 Part 2, which is going to be from Unit 13.3 all the way to Unit 13.5. Now I'm going to first start with the sense organs. Now, in the first video I'm talking about the sense receptor cells. Now these cells sometimes join together to form an organ. Now we have 5 sense organs, which is basically the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the skin. Now the eye is for vision, if we are to see things. The ear is for hearing and for balance as well. The nose is for smell. The tongue is for taste. And the skin is for touch, temperature, and pain. Now we're going to mainly focus on the eye in this syllabus. So basically the eye, you can think of it as a ball full of liquid covered by a thick, soft but strong tissue layer that sits in a very, very narrow bone socket in the front of the skull. Now, only the front of the eye is not covered by bone. Now I'm going to exit full screen here because if I just speak with the diagram without my mouse pointing at certain parts, you guys will be like confused now. So basically, the front of the eye is covered by a thin, transparent membrane called a conjunctiva, which is this part here. And then it helps to protect the parts behind it. The conjunctiva is always kept moist by a fluid made in the tear glands. Now this tear glands, it's sort of like an alkaline solution, also contains enzymes and has the ability to kill pathogens. Now the enzyme it contains is called lysozyme, which kill bacteria. Now the fluid is washed across your eye when you blink. So basically, the part that is below the conjunctiva is the cornea, and then here's a hollow space in between, which is this part is called the pupil, and then this is the iris, and then back here, this right bit is called the lens. Now, here the lens plays a very, very important part in adjusting the focus. Now, the lens is basically like a thick, transparent, concave, disc-like object. I mean, like, you guys should be all very, very familiar with the structure of the eye because most of you, I think all of you would have done the dissection of a pig's eye, and then your teacher will have told you whether to identify each part of them. Now, back here, this is the hollow space of the eye, which is contained with called a semi-solid vitreous humor. So basically, this is like a semi-liquid paste-like structure that supports the eyeball. And then this red layer here is called the retina. Behind the retina is a layer called the choroid, which absorbs the light that passes through the retina. This stops the light from scattering all across the eyeball and protects the eye from further radiation by the light. Now the whole layer of the eye here, at the back of the eye, is covered by a very strong layer called the sclera. Now this protects the eye and is very, very hard to cut. I mean, you all have cut a pig's eye with a knife, and then you all know how difficult it is to cut it. This part here is the optic nerve. Now, all the impulses created by the retina is sent here, and then this nerve takes it to the brain, which the brain then processes the image and then lets your eyes to see. Okay. Next part is the retina. Now the retina is the main part of the eye for sending impulses to the brain as well as creating images. Now it is made up of rod and cone cells. It has a blind spot where it joins the optic nerve. Now let's go back to the image before. So this part here is the blind spot. Now this is the part where no rod or cone cells are present. So if light falls on here, no electrical impulses will be created, so no image will be sent to the brain and processed. So if light falls on your blind spot, you will see nothing. You will see just black all the way through. Now here's a picture of a rod and cone cell. Now they each have different functions. Whilst both of them at the top here should have links of made of fibers that takes impulses to the optic nerve, which takes it to the brain. Now at the end here, these claw-like structures, they lay in the pigment cell in the retina. Now the rod cells are sensitive to quite dim light, so if you are in a very, very dark situation or condition, it's the rod cells that actually works. But they only give images in black and white, and you can pretty see that by testing. If you close your light in your room and then try to see things with color, you'll probably see that they are all of black and white. This is what it is. Now the cone cell is the cell that is sensitive to color, but they only work when the light is quite bright. So in a bright day, or in a very, very light condition, which is a lot of light, it's actually your cone cells that are actually sending impulses to the optic nerve. But when it's in a very dark situation, it's the rod cells that work. Now, at the back of the eye, there is a part which is called the fovea. Now, I don't know whether this label is correct or not, but let's just call this part here the fovea. Now, the fovea is a part where hundreds and thousands of cone cells are packed tightly together here. Now, the use of this, you can see that this is quite actually directly behind the lens. Now, so basically when the lens focuses the light, all that light first focuses here to create a very, very sharp and strong and colorful image. The fovea contains entirely of cones. The rod cells are kind of scattered all the way along here, and then they produce a little less detailed image because you can't see very much in the dark, can't you? That's common sense, basically. Next is the iris. Now the iris is the main part of the eye involved in focusing the light and producing images. The lens as well, but the iris, it plays another part. Now the iris have muscles that run along in it to help it to adjust the focus. Now, part of the action that the iris adjusts the focus is called the iris reflex, that adjusted its size according to the intensity of the light. Now here are 3 images taken from my textbook about how the eye actually focuses the light. Now, we're gonna first focus on the image, the bottom right hand corner, which is how an image is focused onto the retina. So basically, here is the image, right here with the arrow. Now the light is passed from the top of the arrow and the bottom of the arrow, right? So then it first passes through the conjunctiva and the cornea here. Now you can see that the top ray here is going perpendicular into the eye. So the lens, which is this part, and the cornea does not need to bend the light because it's already directly focusing on it. But the bottom ray, you can see that if it's not bended, it's gonna hit somewhere around here, which is not gonna pass through the eye all the way to the retina, which is not gonna focus on image. So basically, when the light reaches the cornea, this part of the cornea bends the light upwards so that it passes to here, to the bottom part of the lens, which then bends it again to then focus it on to the back of the retina. Now you can see that the image is always upside down to the image you actually are seeing. So basically, this image is sent to the brain, and the brain then adjusts the shape of the image. Okay, now let's focus on the top picture. Now, this is a picture of an eye focusing on a distant object. Now, the distant object, you can see that when the light rays are spread out, they only diverge only slightly. So there's less job for the cornea and the lens to bend the light. You can see that over here, the thin lens bends the light rays slightly. It only bends it slightly. And the light is focused on the retina, which is the fovea here, to produce a very sharp, clear image. And this picture here is basically when the eye is focusing on a nearby object. When the light rays come out from a nearby object, it diverges greatly. So this means that there's more job for the cornea and the lens to bend it. So they have to bend it more. So the first part, the cornea bends it, then the lens bends it as well. So the light all focuses on the retina, which is the fovea right here. to also produce a very, very sharp image. Now, there's a little bit of physics involved in here about diverging light rays, but I'm not going to go into that because this is not a physics video, it's going to be a biology video. Now, the adjustment of the shape of the lens, which is different in all these kind of pictures, to focus light coming from different distances is called accommodation. Now, here's a picture of how the lens is actually changed. The shape of the lens is actually changed. You can see that this part is called the ciliary muscle that actually holds the lens in place. Now, when the lens need to focus light from a from a very, very nearby object, this means that it needs to bend the light rays more. And in order to do that, it needs to get thick and fat. In order to do that, the ciliary muscles that supports the lens relaxes. This drops the lens down so that it becomes thick and round. Now, thick and round right here. This is the nearby object. Now, when the lens needs to focus on a distant object, it does not need to bend the light rays that much, so that the lens does not need to be that thick. So it needs to become very, very thin and long. So in order to do that, the ciliary muscles contracts. No, the ciliary muscle actually relaxes in the distant object to change the shape of the lens to be very, very thin. And it actually contracts here when it's focused on a nearby object. This is a very, very common mistake. I just made that mistake when I was explaining, and I apologize for that. So you need to remember that when the lens is actually allowed to bulge to focus on a nearby object, the ciliary muscles actually contract. And then the suspensory ligaments, which also a part that holds the lens in place, it slackens, so it relaxes as well, to let the lens bulge to become very fat and short. Now, when the eye is focusing on a distant object, the ciliary muscles relaxes so that it pulls the lens back to very, very thin, and the suspensory ligaments are pulled tight. Now, this is kind of a bit like a contradictory kind of thing, because it's somewhat the opposite of what is meant to be happen when we think about it, but it's just that. So you need to make sure that you read these carefully and then know what action is going to happen when light is focusing on distant or nearby object. Now I'm going to talk about the iris reflex. Now, the iris reflex, I don't have any pictures here because I think it's quite straightforward. So if you look at your own eye, right, you can see that the colored bit is the iris. Now, along that iris, there's two types of muscles. There are circular muscles, which lies in circles around the pupil, so they runs in the same shape as your iris. And there are also radial muscles that run outwards from the edge of the pupil to the edge of the iris, so they run like perpendicular to the pupil. Now, in bright light, the iris gets bigger, so that the pupil is pulled smaller in order to let less light to get into the eye to prevent damage to the retina. Now, when this happens, the circular muscles in the iris contracts and pulls the iris thicker. When in dim light, our pupil needs to get larger to allow more light in, so we can focus on more clear image. In this case, the iris is pulled thinner by the radial muscles, which contracts. Now, this action is another reflex action that does not need you to control it, because I don't think you have control over the muscles. They just happen automatically every time you come into a bright situation or a dark situation, you know. Okay, now I'm going to go on to the endocrine system. Now, the endocrine system is another way of coordination and response using hormones and chemical means. Now, the hormones are secreted in endocrine glands, and the hormones only affect its target organs. For example, if you have insulin that targets the liver for example, if you have the hormone glucagon that targets the liver to basically break down more glycogen into glucose, the glucagon will not target, for example, your muscles. It will only target the liver, so it will not have an effect on any other part of the body except the liver. That's why the hormones only affect its target organs, to make sure that your body is not too much affected by the hormones, because in fact it's a chemical, and then it's not something, very, very organic made, that kind of thing. Now, here are the locations of the major endocrine glands. Now there are only four main glands that you need to know. The first one is the pituitary gland, which is here up in your brain, around here. The second one is your thyroid gland, which is around your neck, this purple one here. The third one is the adrenal glands, which is slightly behind and above the pancreas. And the next two is basically the ovary in the female reproductive system, which releases eggs, and the testes, which is in the male scrotum. Now, the ovaries, they produce estrogen, a female sex hormone, and the testes, they produce testosterone, which is the male sex hormone. Now, the endocrine also occurs in the heart, alimentary canal, kidney, skin, placenta, and elsewhere. It does not occur with, for example, like the liver and some kind of stuff. Okay. In the next part, I'm going to talk about adrenaline, which is the main hormone we're going to focus on in this syllabus. Now, adrenaline is secreted by the adrenal glands whenever you feel frightened, excited, or keyed up. It helps you to cope with danger with fight or flight responses. Also, it gives you butterfly in your stomach. Now, basically what adrenaline does is that it makes your heart beat faster, supply oxygen to your brain and muscles more quickly. This gives you energy for fighting or running away. It also increases breathing rate so that more oxygen can enter the blood into the lungs. Now, the butterfly in your stomach can be explained by the blood vessels in your skin and digestive system contract so that they carry very little blood. This makes you go pale. Also, adrenaline causes the pupils in the eye to widen. This allows more light into the eye, which might help you to see danger more clearly. Now, adrenaline also causes the liver to release glucose into the blood. This provides extra energy for your muscles when it needs to respond. Now, here's a table of both some important endocrine glands, as well as the hormones they secreted, as well as their functions, as well as a summary of both the nervous system and the endocrine system. Now, the main glands you need to know, which are four: the adrenal gland, the pancreas, the testes, the ovaries. Now, these are the only four, and you also need to know the pituitary gland and the thyroid gland, but you do not need to know exactly what hormone do they produce. Now, pancreas, insulin, it reduces the concentration of glucose in the blood. Testosterone causes the development of male secondary sexual characteristics, and estrogen causes the development of female secondary sexual characteristics and helps in control of the menstrual cycle. Now, the summary of the two systems, well, obviously one is made up of neurons, one is made up of secretory cells. Information transmitted in the form of electrical impulses and chemicals called hormones. Impulses transmitted along nerve fibers as well, and the other system, it is carried and dissolved in the blood. Now, for the nervous system, the impulse travels very, very quickly. For the endocrine system, it travels much more slowly. But for the endocrine system, the effect of a hormone may last longer, whilst the effect of a nerve impulse usually lasts for only a very short time, like less than a second or so. Now, the coordination and response in plants is another very big unit that does not need very, very much focus, but however, students may get confused with some of it. Now, the coordination and response in plants is called tropism. Now, the two important stimuli to plants are light and gravity. Now, there are two types of tropisms. They are gravitropism and phototropism. Now, gravitropism is a response in which a plant grows towards or away from gravity. Phototropism is a response in which a plant grows towards or away from the direction from which the light is coming. Now, the main action in the plant that causes the plant to grow is caused by the plant hormone auxin. It's the hormone in plants that makes the plant respond to light and gravity. It makes the cells behind the tip of the shoot, which is the growing part of the plant, gets longer so that the shoot bends towards wherever it needs to bend. Now, the distribution of auxin depends on the distribution of light on the shoot. For example, if the light is distributed evenly across the tip of the shoot, then the auxin will be distributed evenly as well. But, for example, if the light is focused on only one part of the tip, then the auxin will focus on that part, which causes the other part, which does not have the light, to grow more, so that the shoot bends towards the light in order to get the backside of the plant to receive more sunlight. Now, here is the two pictures of which a plant reacts to gravitropism. Now, the plant is divided into two parts: the root, which is I'm going to exit full screen here. The root, which is this white part, and the shoot, which is this green part here. The one thing you need to remember about these two is the shoot always grows against gravity, which means that the shoot will always grow towards the opposite direction of which the gravity is acting on. So basically, the gravity is pulling things down towards the earth, but the shoot grows up towards the sky. This is always true, even if you turn a plant sideways like this, and after a few days, you'll see that the plant has actually turned upwards. It'll always be like that and never going down. Even if you turn the plant completely upside down, you'll find that after, for example, like a few months, the plant will actually make a U-bend and grow upwards. Now, the shoot always grows towards gravity, which means that the root will always grow towards gravity, which means that the root will always grows downwards, no matter which way the seed is positioned. The root here will always grow downwards. Now, the picture on the left here is a picture of whether to test whether auxin has an effect on plant, and by just reading it, you can see that it does have. Now, the plant only works. Now the tropism only works if auxin is distributed to every single part of the plant. So the auxin is made at the tip. Now, in order for the plant to move, the auxin needs to diffuse all the way down here. Now, in the second experiment, this part is replaced with a permeable agar jelly, which then you can see that the plant actually bends because the auxin is actually diffuses through the agar jelly down here. But if you see that if a piece of mica cuts in here, which is impermeable, then the shoot does not grow because auxin cannot diffuse past the mica down to the rest of the plant. And here's just what I explained earlier about even light and unidirectional light, and yeah. Now, etiolation. Etiolation is when plants grow in an environment that has absolutely no light. Now, a plant that grows in this kind of environment is said to be etiolated. Now, the appearance of these kind of plants will be very, very tall and thin, with yellow leaves, and they are very further apart. Now, they will die eventually because they cannot photosynthesis. Now, when a seed first starts to germinate, it grows using the energy that is stored in the seed. But when the seed energy is used up, then the plant must photosynthesis in order to get the energy for it to further growth. Now, if it can't, because it's in a very dark environment, it will eventually die because it does not get enough energy and food that it makes for itself to grow. Now, I'm also going to talk about weed killers. Now, weed killers works by spraying auxin on weeds. Now, Weed killers contain plant hormones. These hormones are often a type of auxin, usually a synthetic form. Now, the weed killers used to kill weeds, they are selective, which when they are sprayed onto your lawn, the weeds are affected by the auxin, but the grass is not. For example, only the pest or the weed is affected by the auxin, but not the plant that you actually wanted to keep. Now, the weeds respond to the auxin by growing very, very fast. Then the weeds die, leaving more space, nutrients, and water for the grass to grow. Now, the farmers, they use similar weed killers to kill weeds growing in cereal crops such as wheat, millet, maize, or sorghum or rice fields. Now, it is not ideal to use too much, as it can sometimes affect the plant you want to keep as well. For example, the maize crop, and it is bad for humans if we ingested it. So that's it. Alright, the video is an end to here. I hope you guys learned something from it. The last two parts are actually quite confusing because you have to explain a lot of things. You have to explain how does the lens change and how does the iris change in response to dim or bright light, as well as focusing on distant and the nearby objects. But I've explained them quite clearly and quite easily without saying too much things. And then I think if you guys understand the process, then you will be pretty easy with it, because a lot of these questions related in the exam will only be telling you to, for example, like label, which you guys, if you just remember it, then it will be quite easy, as well as it will tell you to describe or explain. Now, explain, you can say that, well, it's pretty easy, and describe is just basically what I've described. Yeah. And then the endocrine system, well, you only need to know about the adrenal gland, adrenaline and its effects, and just some main endocrine glands, which is the pituitary gland, the thyroid, adrenal glands, and testes and ovaries. As well, you need to list. This is very important. List the advantages and disadvantages, as well as the characteristics of both the nervous system and the endocrine system, which is listed in this table right here. So basically, if you memorize all this, you'll do good in the exam, probably. As well as the plant hormone. Plant hormone is pretty easy. You just need to know that it is the auxin that causes the plant to move. It is created at the tip, needs to work by diffuse it down to the whole of the plant. And then you need to remember that the root grows against the force of gravity, while the root grows towards the force of gravity. And that's it. My next video is going to be on Unit 14, which is homeostasis. This is recommended by my fellow students, and then I don't want to upset them by not doing it, so I'm going to do it. And why not? And I'll see you then. Goodbye.